Hello again. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Lifelong Learning Program. Now I want to introduce once again Natalie from the Langley Adams Library, which has sponsored the last 3 programs we've had here. So without further ado, here's my friend Natalie.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see you all again. I'm Natalie from the Langley Adams Library, and today's program is sponsored by a federal grant that our library received from the Library and Technology Services Act. It's a federal grant, and it's administered by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. And this program is a part of multiple programs, part of a series that we've been having this month and the month of April, based around Michael Togis's book, The Finest Hours, which has a maritime theme. And today's program is a presentation to you by a local author, KD Mason. He writes a mystery series, a Jack Beale mystery series, set in the fictitious town of Rye Harbor, New Hampshire. And so he's a lifelong runner. He lives on the New Hampshire seacoast with his wife and 3 cats. He has 2 grown children, a son who lives in Las Vegas and a daughter who lives with her husband and their daughter in Massachusetts. A lifetime of working in the restaurant business, sailing in the Caribbean and New England, and hanging out with an active running community has given him a wealth of story ideas. Please join me in welcoming KD Mason.
Thank you, Natalie. It's very nice of you to have me here today. I've never had a crowd this large. Like she said, my name's KD Mason, and I kill people. Not really. But I write locally set murder mysteries. They're all centered in the New Hampshire, Southern Maine, Northern Massachusetts seacoast area. The books feature the same cast of characters, and the books will stand alone. You don't need to read them in order, in sequential order, although I find most people seem to prefer reading in that way. They are well, my main character, Jack Beale, is just an ordinary guy. He's not a policeman, he's not a detective. He's just an ordinary guy, and seems to get pulled into circumstances and situations that he wasn't looking for, and they lead to usually involve a dead body, solving the murders. He has an off and on again relationship with the feisty red-haired bartender at Ben's restaurant, at Ben's place in Rye Harbor. And their relationship is chronicled through the books. It's made for a very interesting journey for myself. Today I thought first I would like to just tell you a little bit about how I became a writer, how I got to where I am today, because it was nothing that I ever intended to do. It was nothing I had any great burning desire for through my life. As a matter of fact, recently we found some old papers that my father had saved, and within this folder was an envelope with a letter from 4-page handwritten letter from my 8th grade English teacher to my parents, explaining that pretty much as dumb as a stump. It was not kind. And that letter, I believe, was the smoking gun that got me yanked out of the public school system and sent away to a private school. And I'm not sure I excelled any more there than I did in the public system. And I just got a big kick out of finding that, because I didn't know anything about that letter, and here I am today writing books, so go figure. This all started for me about 2006, thereabouts. At the time, I was still in the restaurant business. I'm no longer in the restaurant business. And it was in the middle of the winter. It was very quiet, very cold. And one evening, my bartender and I were sitting there waiting for the last customers to leave. And we got talking about writing books. She always wanted to write a book. She wanted to base it on all of the stories and shenanigans that she had seen over the years working in the restaurant. And so we just got talking. And as we talked, I remembered a photograph I had taken a number of years prior of some very interesting ice formations that were left in front of the restaurant when the tide went out. And I said to her, I said, what a great place to find a dead body under one of these slabs of ice. And so that just got the two of us going, and we sat up for hours that night. Closed the restaurant, we just sat there talking. And all of a sudden, we decided we were going to write a book together. And so we started creating some characters. We had a rough idea of a story, but not really where it would go, but we had the beginnings. I thought we were going to collaborate on this in the sense that we might alternate writing chapters or do something like that. And as it turned out, I was the only person that put words on paper. And that's kind of an important part of becoming a writer, is that that's the first thing you have to do. Until you do that, it's all a pipe dream. And I discovered that I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Now, she and I still talk continuously, and she still grumbles that she is going to get her book written someday, and I keep saying, you've got to put words on paper, but she just hasn't gotten to that point yet. So we would talk continuously. I would write every day for about an hour. First thing in the morning, I'd write for about an hour. That's all I did, an hour a day. And over a number of months, all of a sudden, we had a completed manuscript. And the two of us were all excited. It's like, we wrote a book. It's great. And the sad reality was it really wasn't that good. In our minds, it was wonderful. A friend of mine who had been involved with some publishing in a number of years prior, asked a friend of his if she would give the book a read. She used to do some editing for him, and he asked if she would give it a read to give me some feedback. I think he asked her more just to shut me up than anything else, but she was very kind, and she read the book, the manuscript. And a number of months after I had given it to her, we got together. It was in the middle of the summer. We were sitting at the restaurant. We had a glass of wine. We chit-chat. We small-talked. This went on for a while. Finally, it came to that awkward moment when something had to be said about the book. And she looked at me, and she kind of took a breath, and she said, well, I really liked your last sentence. I was so naive to the whole thing, I didn't realize I was just hitting the head with a shovel, and I was like, great, she liked it! And that began I'm going to call it adventure of rewriting that book ultimately 9 complete times as I learned to write. Basically, as I taught myself to write. And at different points in the process, I think it was at the end of versions roughly 3, 5, and 7, I would pawn off the manuscript on a friend, ask them to read it, and give me some general feedback. I wasn't looking for an editing job, but just general feedback. And the 2 questions that I was the most concerned about were, are the characters believable? And is the story viable? Does it make sense? And the answer to both of those questions always came back, yes. So I was very encouraged. And each time I rewrote the book, it grew in depth. The characters became more defined. Descriptions became better. And it grew. And I learned, I think I learned how to write. I have always been a reader throughout my entire life, and I think that's an important part of being a writer, is to have been a reader. And I've read all kinds of books, mystery, suspense, you name it, historical fiction, real history, real history, whatever. And I could always tell if a book was good. I couldn't tell you why it was good. I couldn't always tell you why I liked it, but I could tell whether I did or didn't. And so I would, as I finished each rewrite, I would read the book, and I would be able to read the book as a reader. And I would see things, and I would say, oh, that's just awful. You've got to fix that. You need to change this. And that's how I learned to write. At the end of the 7th version of the book, and it was pretty close to complete at that time. It was really coming together very nicely. I gave it to one of my running friends. Her name was Mary. Very sharp, very outspoken young woman. And she read the book, and one night we were with another group of runners, and we were off doing a run. And we got talking, and she said, well, you know, I finished the book. And I said, well, how'd you like it? And she said, well, you're writing a beach read, right? I said, yeah, it's just a light, fun book. It's nothing that's, you know, it's not going to win a Pulitzer Prize or anything. It's enjoyable vacation book. And she said, well, you've done a good job. It's terrific. But that made me very nervous because I know Mary. She said, you know, the only thing that's missing, because you are writing a beach read, and every good beach read book has to have a couple pages that are juicy, where you're going to turn the corner down and you have no sex in this book. You have to fix that. Well, let me tell you, I just about panicked on that one. I learned very quickly that that was far and away the most difficult subject to write about or write on. You know the old saying, you write what you know? I could end up divorced if I write this. So I was very apprehensive about it. And I realized that there were 2 ways of approaching it. And, you know, one method, which is just no fun, nobody particularly likes it, at least no one that I know, but it's just a very explicit, heavy breathing, throbbing members, heaving bazooms kind of writing, you know, and it's not creative. It's actually pretty boring. Or you can create scenes that will have enough detail that the reader will create their own picture in their mind. And you're giving them the idea, and they're reading it, and then they go into the story themselves, and they remember that. Oh, yeah, I remember that. That was great. And so that's what I tried to do. It seemed to work. By no means is it a major part of the story, but it is part of the story because there's a relationship between my character and Max, his love interest. And but it seemed to work, and I got past that hurdle. The woman who had originally read the book and liked my last sentence read the book after the 8th rewrite. She read it again, and at that point she said, "Dang, you've become a writer, and I'm going to publish it for you." And she became my first publisher. And that was just, it's so exciting. It really was a great feeling to know that, you had actually done this and that people liked it. And the book, that was Harbor Ice, and the book has done very well. In going through that process, I discovered that I really did like the writing. It's fun having little invisible friends that you can do anything you like to. If they're nice to you, they have very nice lives. If they annoy you, not so nice. They become very real. I found that with all of the books, at the very beginning, all that I ever had was a dead body and an idea for finding a dead body. Actually, I have them kind of stacked up like cordwood in the back of my head, waiting for stories. And as I get into the process, I've gotten to know my characters. I'm a very visual writer. And by that I mean I see the book, I see the story in my mind before I write it. It's like watching a movie and it's a blank screen, and whatever I see, whatever I think, I will then see on the screen, and then that's what I write. I'm not sure how much sense that makes, but I have talked to other writers and they've had the same experience. And with each of the books, I've never pre-plotted out the story. I've never had known exactly where the story was going to go. The characters wrote the story. The characters wrote the book. In Harbor Ice, you find out who did it at the same point in the book that I found out who did it. I had no idea where it was going. But the characters, every now and then, you're going in one direction, all of a sudden something happens and they go off in this direction. And so you follow your characters. And that's how it's worked for me. And that's kind of makes it exciting in a lot of ways. Because every day when I sit down to write, I don't know where it's going. And some days you struggle and you stare at the computer screen and you might end up writing 2 sentences at the end of an hour or an hour and a half. Other days, something just clicks and the character talks to you and off you go. In writing the characters, you have to become the characters. They become part of you. When I'm writing the part of Jack Beale, I have to become Jack Beale and try to think like him. When I'm writing a chapter or a scene that is predominantly his love interest, Max, well, I have to become this very feisty young woman bartender. If I have a scene that has, an elderly person in it, I have to become that elderly person or the local policeman. And it's interesting how that happens. And I found you can just kind of fall into it. Just all of a sudden, I'm that person. In the third book, Dangerous Shoals, which I'd like to read a couple short passages from. There's a psychopathic killer in that story. And I was kind of disturbed writing that because I was like, I don't really think I'm like that, but that's the way he was, and I had to become that person. It was very strange. But in the end, they're stories, they're fun stories, and I'm just in the process of finishing the fourth book in the series, and I have a couple more kicking around in the back of my heads. So this will go on for a while. Harbor Ice was published in 2009. Changing Tides came out in 2010. Dangerous Shoals 2011. And the new book will be out this fall, 2012, and off we go. So, like I said, I didn't intend to become a writer. I've kind of learned to be a writer, and it's just fun. And I can't imagine doing anything else at this point. It's just, it's a kick. That's all I can say about it. But the important thing is you got to put words on paper. Until you do that, you got nothing. And everybody has a story. I run into people every day and they say, oh, I've always wanted to write a book. Well, sit down and write it. What's the worst that'll happen? It'll be terrible. I did that. And then you go back and you fix it. But you need to, don't overthink it. You just do it. It's the Nike school. Just do it. In the end, it can be very, very rewarding. If I may, I'd like to, what I'd like to do is read a couple passages, short passages from Dangerous Shoals, which is my third book in the series. In this story, Jack and Max, things had finally settled down after the adventures of Changing Tides, and they were looking forward to a very quiet, normal summer. And as it turned out, an individual who had was kind of the center of the second book, and they had assumed he had been killed, or he certainly disappeared at the end of the book, reappears. And he's keeping a very low profile. He is being pursued by this psychopathic killer. They don't know this. They don't even know that he's around. They keep, once in a while, think they see him, but convince themselves that he's not there. Eventually he makes contact, tells them that he's in some kind of trouble, but won't define it. Shortly afterwards, the killer gets hold of him, and that's the end of him. That's it. Unfortunately, the killer did not get from Daniel what he wanted. And he begins pursuing Jack and Max. Only they don't know it. And he stalks them for quite some time before they come in. And Jack has a cat, pet cat, named Cat. And the first passage that I'm going to read you is when Cat first meets this killer, whose name is Kurt. Kurt Max and Jack don't know anything about him. He saw an opportunity to break into Jack's home. He wanted to place a bug so he can listen in on them to see if he could find out what he was looking for, what he was looking for is, or if they even have it. He thinks they do. They don't know they do. And the cat is there. And so this is the section where the cat first meets him. It's time, the watcher had thought to himself as he watched Jack return to Ben's. He'll be there for the rest of the night protecting his little woman. Then from his car he retrieved an old canvas bag with a single strap that had been used in World War I by couriers as they ran orders from between the front lines and the rear. From the bag he took out a pair of thin leather gloves and worked them on. They fit like a second skin. He slung the bag over his shoulder and began following the shadows over to Jack's. There was no moon, and Courtney's place was dark. Courtney's the next door neighbor. Courtney's place was dark. Jack hadn't left any lights on, and the other houses nearby were also unoccupied for the moment. It was a world of dark shapes and shadows. It was his kind of world, and he felt at home. It only took seconds to get past the lock on the door, and he snickered to himself at how easy it was. Once inside, he stopped to listen. Then he slowly sniffed the air. He had learned many years ago never to trust only one of his senses. It was a habit that had served him well, sometimes meaning the difference between success and failure. He began easing his way up the stairs, testing each step, feeling every subtle nuance of their surface through his thin-soled shoes. At the top of the stairs, he paused again. No matter how dark the night, unless he was in a sealed room, there was always enough light for his kind of work. Even an empty house made noise, and he listened to the sounds that this place made. The soft hum of a computer, the cycling of the refrigerator, a creak, since no building is ever perfectly still. He listened and sniffed again. Cat. He smelled a cat. He hated cats. When he was a child, his neighbor had a cat. It was a large white cat with a funny pushed-in face, long wild hair, and green eyes. He remembered those green eyes. One day he was out playing by the street. The cat came up to him and rubbed up against his leg. It felt good, so he bent down and stroked the cat's fur. He was fascinated with how silky and soft it was. He kept stroking the cat, but it wasn't long before the cat had had enough and began to walk off. He didn't understand why the cat would leave. A dog would have stayed. He was so fascinated by the softness of the cat's coat, he wanted to keep stroking it. Running after the cat didn't help. The faster he ran, the more the cat panicked, and he was unable to get close to it. Finally, he caught up to the cat as it was crying by the door to the house where it lived. He had it cornered, and the trapped cat hunched down and faced him, emitting a low growl as it looked at him with those green eyes. He didn't understand that noise and reached out for the cat, which yowled, struck out with its paws, scratched his arm, and then ran off. He was in shock as he looked at the reddening lines on his arm. He watched as the redness slowly began to weep, and soon blood was dripping down his arm. At first there was no pain, just anger. The pain came with the blood, and with that, hatred. The knife then wasn't as sharp or as sophisticated as the one he now possessed, but it was sharp enough, and with it he discovered that power over life and death gave him profound enjoyment. He slowly walked around, taking mental notes, learning about Jack and his home. The more he knew, the better. As he moved about, he turned on a very small flashlight with a red lens. It would not diminish his night vision, and it provided enough illumination to allow him to more quickly finish his task. Better yet, it couldn't be seen by anyone outside. He entered the bedroom. He shined the light around the room, stopping when it came to the bed. The covers were disheveled. He sat on the edge of the bed and imagined their naked bodies all hot and sweaty as they made love. The thought both disgusted him and excited him. After a moment, he moved into the bathroom and flashed the light around. A quick glance in the medicine cabinet told him nothing. A pair of white lace panties on the floor caught his attention, and he bent over and picked them up. He could almost feel their silky softness through his gloves. Holding them near his face, he inhaled and smiled to himself before dropping them back on the floor. He moved on, completing the tour. Cat could sense the evil in his presence, so she moved silently with him, curious but invisible, watching him as he moved about picking up objects and putting them back down. He returned to the living room where he picked up a lamp. This time his movements were different. They were quick and sure as he handled it. Then, after returning it to its place on the table, he turned and shined his light around the room one last time before moving silently down the stairs. Kat's ears twitched as she heard the door open, then close. She smelled it first, then felt the faint puff of cold night air float up the stairs, as if cleansing away the evil that he had brought into her home. He was gone. Still hiding in the shadows, Kat didn't move for several minutes as she lay panting with an open mouth. This was a cat way of sampling, absorbing, and memorizing a new scent. The instinct to survive demanded that this be done, and on some elemental level, Kat knew that evil had visited, and she had to learn as much as possible. Then, slowly, cautiously, she came out from her hiding place and began her investigation. His scent lingered, stronger in some places, less so in others, but it was everywhere. She retraced his steps, stopping where he stopped, sniffing and learning. She would know him anywhere, and she would never forget that he had been there. So Kat has met Kurt. And Kat plays a significant role in this story. If you're a cat lover, you're going to like that. Moving on, Kurt still has maintained his anonymity, and he has been spying on Jack and Max ostensibly as a bird watcher. He hangs out at the harbor, he has binoculars, and there's lots of birds, seagulls and different kinds of birds in the salt marshes around. And so he's able to essentially hide out in broad daylight, in the middle of everyone else. He just blended in. And this is the first time that someone actually had an interaction with him. And he found it a little unsettling. Kurt lowered his binoculars and smiled to himself. He was standing on the small beach across the harbor from Ben's. It gave him a clear view of Jack's boat, and conveniently, the breakwater that extended out from where he stood was covered with birds for him to watch. At that moment, a voice close behind startled him. "Hi there! Did you see anything interesting today?" It was a woman's voice, and there was something about it that just sounded nosy. Physically, he hardly moved at the sound of the voice, but his heart felt like it skipped a beat. He turned. Facing him was a short, thin, older woman. She was wearing a baggy white shirt with khaki slacks and well-worn, mud-stained hiking boots. Thank you. A long silver braid dropped down her back from underneath a wide-brimmed straw hat, and a brightly colored scarf around her neck completed her outfit. Binoculars, almost as large as his, hung from her neck, and she carried a well-worn notebook in one hand. Her craggy face was well-tanned but plain, yet vibrancy shone through. She looked up at him, smiling. Holding out her hand, she said, "Hi, my name is Gladys." Then she repeated her original question. "Did you see anything interesting today?" Ignoring her hand, Kurt looked at her and said in slow, measured tones, "No, not really." She withdrew her hand and continued to look deeply at him, her smile slowly fading, only to be replaced with a more curious look. "I've seen you around. I'm always out looking at my birds. You never know what you could miss. They're so small." She was making him nervous, and she wouldn't shut up. Before he could respond, she continued, "Those are pretty slick binoculars you have. What kind are they?" She reached out as if to touch them. He pulled back ever so slightly, but it was enough for her to notice, and she withdrew her hand again. Before he could answer her question, she went on, "I don't remember what kind mine are. I got them from my father when he died. He was a bird watcher, too. He used to go out every day, and he taught me. He always said that these were his lucky binoculars. but the nameplate fell off years ago, so I don't know what kind they are. That's nice, but I really have to get going, he said in a dismissive tone. He turned away from her and walked off toward his car. Gladys was silenced by his abrupt departure, her mouth open as if in mid-sentence. Well, isn't he the odd one? She said to herself in a voice not much higher than a whisper. Then, without thinking, she slowly raised her binoculars to her eyes and looked in the direction that he had been looking. She didn't see any birds, only two people leaving a boat hand in hand. She lowered her binoculars and turned her head in the direction to which Kurt had walked off. He was nowhere to be seen. Strange, she murmured, and despite the warmth of the sun, a chill went down her spine. So Gladys meets Kurt. She also comes back to haunt him. So, any questions? I think probably it's best if there's anything in particular that any of you would like to know, or about writing, about publishing, about the stories, it might be easiest just to do that for a little bit. Yes?
So Jack and the bartender lady,
Yes.
are they the main two characters in your three books?
Yes. Yes. Yes, sir.
How does the cat come back to haunt him in the sense that, what does he do?
Well, Kurt does visit the apartment again, and I really don't want to tell you exactly what happened. Let me put it this way. I had to really wrestle with the issue of, do I kill the cat or not? Or does Kurt kill the cat or not? So you're just going to have to read the book.
I don't want to let the cat out of the bag.
Very good. Well said. Yes, ma'am.
When you're writing a book,
Yes.
very quiet, nobody around, or in music?
Usually it's quiet because I'm the first one up in the morning. And once I really can't do anything until the cats get breakfast because they're just completely obnoxious. But once they've been fed, I sit down with a cup of coffee, and that's when I work. Usually halfway through the session, my wife will get up, and there'll be background noise. It doesn't really bother me because I can tune that stuff out. Rarely do I play music when I'm writing. Occasionally I do. Sometimes I'll have something on. But I find the first thing in the morning is when my brain works the best. And so I usually write for an hour to 2 hours every morning.
Solitude to keep your mind going.
No. And some days there's just nothing happening up there. And other days, the story's always with you. It's with me 24/7. It's just always in my head. And with the new book that I'm writing, I had some storyline issues that I kind of knew where I wanted it to go, but I didn't know how to get there. And I was just not figuring it out. And I had many days where I just sat and just stumbled through sentences that made no sense, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And driving in the car, I heard an interview on the radio with someone about, I don't even remember what the subject was right now. But whatever it was all of a sudden like, perfect. That will give me the answer to what I'm looking for. So ideas, you never know where they come from, so it's always with me. But it's, and some days, the writing is, you struggle to get a sentence out. And other days, you write 3 chapters. Yes?
Have you taken any formal writing classes?
No.
None?
No.
Oh,
No.
fine.
When I first started, I remember going into Barnes & Noble. I told myself I really ought to get a thesaurus. It just seemed like a thing that writers ought to have. I had a dictionary, but I didn't have a thesaurus. So I went in, and there was this bookshelf probably as wide as those two doorways. Had to have been 1,000 titles on there on how to write. And I looked at it and I said, if I even touch one of those books, I will never write a thing. So I said, the hell with it. I can do this. And I learned it's a lot of work. And it doesn't just happen. And to become good, it takes a lot of effort. But basically, I'm self-taught. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What was the last sentence that this first?
I don't have that book in front of me. But I didn't change it. Yes.
Are you one of the characters in the book?
Good question. I've been asked that before. I think all of the characters are compilations of, okay, I'm not any one character, but probably parts of me inhabit a lot of the characters. Friends of mine swear that they see themselves, oh, that was me. No question, that was me. And I said, whatever you think, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, I don't know. So all the characters are just made up of bits and pieces of people you know, people you see, who knows where it comes from. So there's little bits in there. But my character's definitely, he runs much better than I am. He's a far better sailor. He can drink more beer. I mean, he's got it all over me. Yes?
I'm thinking of a scene in the movie The Shining where Jack Nicholson is working at his computer and just repeating the same line over and over and over and over again. Do you work with a computer?
Yes. Yes.
And you don't get into that sort of thing with anything in mind?
Oh, no, that happens sometimes. Oh, absolutely. Yes, I do write on a computer. I cannot put thoughts together clear enough to write it on a piece of paper and have it usable. It would take me 200 sheets of paper to get one page that was usable. I couldn't afford it. What I find happens is that when I'm writing, I also don't delete things right away. So I'll have a thought going and I'll be writing that thought or that description, and I might get a sentence or two into it and it just isn't working. Well, what I do then is I just skip a line and I start over again and I find another way to say it. And then if that stalls out, I skip over and I just start again. And sometimes I end up with 2 or 3 pages, none of which, as a whole, it's not what I want. But within that, I have the 5 sentences that I need and that I'm looking for. And gradually, it all comes together. And then I start deleting things and rearranging or taking things out. But there are times when, yeah, you just have to, you go over it and you write it and you say, oh, it just doesn't sound right, but I know what I want to say. How else can I say it? And you just keep trying it until you find something that all of a sudden it works. And you say, yeah, that's it. That's what I want. That's how I want to say it. And it doesn't always come right away. It's nice when it does. I saw a hand up in the back over here. Yes?
Do you aspire to have your characters become part of a TV miniseries or on Mystery Theater?
Oh, who doesn't?
Do you keep that in mind when you write?
Not when I'm writing. But, you know, I mean, all those little fantasies are out there. You know, I would love to have 1% of Dan Brown's success. You know, I mean, you know, you're always hoping for that something like that will happen. I firmly believe that hitting it big success in writing is largely luck, just dumb luck. It's a question of, does the right person read the book at the right time? Does it resonate the right way? Does it get handed off to the right person? And all of a sudden, bada bing, you're there. But you play those games all the time. You say, what if? Now, here's an interesting thing. I've said to myself, all right, let's just say that the book became a movie. Who would play the characters? I come up with nothing. I write these people, I know these people, I'm inside these people's heads, the characters' heads, and yet I cannot put a face with them. I can't think of anybody that I've seen in any movie or TV show that I would visualize playing any of these characters. I come up with nothing on that.
What about The House of Sand and Fog? Who's the author?
I know that. Yes.
What about that? That was, somebody just wrote a book and they took that up and they made a movie out of it?
Yeah, it happens. You know, it could happen. You know, we always hope that it happens. And, you know, so you're always, you know, with...
He's from Haverhill and Newburyport.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right, Andre Cruz.
Andre.
Right. You know, what happens when, in the world of publishing today, so much of it falls on the author to self-promote. You have to become a shameless self-promoter. And I'm always contacting libraries, bookstores. I'm looking for places to try and sell the books. Any kind of a store that might be interested in carrying the books. A week from tomorrow, I went to a little wine and cheese store in Exeter. And I approached her because I saw she made up gift baskets. And I said, you know, I write these murder mysteries. These would be great additions to your gift baskets. And I convinced her that she would like to sell the books in her store. And so she's doing that. And she's done quite well with them, actually. And a week from Friday, I'm going to her store where she's having a beer tasting and a book signing. So I'm always looking for opportunities to talk to people and to go anywhere. Yes?
If you were to say somebody approached you as making one of your stories into a movie, now would you require them to pretty much keep to what the book is? Because so many times Hollywood gets a hold of a thing. Like I'm thinking of The Great Gatsby.
Right.
I like the way the author did it. But when the movie came out with it, they changed it.
Totally abolished it.
And that's not just in that story, but others as well.
Probably 99.5%. They changed it.
And a good example is with Dickens, the Christmas Carol. You hardly know what the original version of it is.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And how do you feel? Would you want?
Well, you know, obviously I think I would very much like to see it remain true to the story that I wrote. But I also I think I understand that if someone bought the rights to the story, that it could change. I mean, like Janet Ivanovich just had one of her books, One for the Money, made into a movie with Katherine Heigl played her character. I love Janet Ivanovich's books. They're fluffy little light books. I love them. But I'm sorry, that movie was horrible. Terrible casting. Terrible.
What's the purpose of them changing?
I don't know. You know, the best advice that was given to me, I met a gal 2 weeks ago at the York Library. I was doing an event just like this. And she used to live in California, and she did some screenwriting. They would give her a script, and she would tweak it and fix it, So she was just, a hired contractor to do that. And we kind of got talking about this, and she said it's real simple. If somebody comes to you and they want to option your book and buy your book to make a movie, doesn't mean they'll make it, but if they want to, it's real simple. They're going to throw a bucket load of money at you. You're going to throw the thing over the fence at them and just walk away. Just take the money and run. So I don't know. I haven't yet been faced with that issue. I'm hoping, but so I'll cross that bridge when I get there.
So you don't have any say at all in what they do with the movie?
Well, I don't know exactly how that works. Because some movies seem to be very follow stories very well. Others don't even resemble it. And some authors I've heard are welcomed onto the set to see what's going on. Others, they're not, just go away. I heard that Janet Ivanovich, when they made One for the Money, they did let her on the set. And I remember reading somewhere where they asked her about it, the way they cast the characters. Her character, Stephanie Plum, which was cast by Katherine Heigl. Bad choice in my mind, but that's okay. And her comment was, well, she's a little taller and a little thinner and a little blonder than my character, so maybe my character will have to change in the future. Yes?
Well, I'm halfway through reading Harbor Ice, and I was just introduced to Kat this morning on my way to work, and I was interested that Kat didn't have any other name except Kat, and it instantly made me think of the short story by Truman Capote, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and I wonder if there's any connection there.
Well, that's really an interesting... See, that's why I love doing these events. I love Breakfast at Tiffany's. I love the movie. And maybe subconsciously it was there. I never thought of that. I think it was more just, it's Jack's cat. And Jack is just kind of this go-with-the-flow, ordinary guy. And he's not going to waste a lot of time trying to figure out what to name a cat. It's a cat. Okay, you're a cat. And it just stuck.
Believe it or not, we have a cat, and for a long time, we called him Cat.
Sure.
We never got around to naming him.
And we'll do that.
And then we read a story about Dewey the library cat. And I don't know whether you've ever read that or not, but it was about the life of a 20-year-old cat, and he'd spend his time in the library. So we called that cat what we call Cat. Dewey.
That works.
Yeah. That was about 4 or 5 years after we read the book.
It's never too late to come up with a name. Sometimes you just have to work into it, what you call them. My wife and I still argue over one of the names of one of our cats. I mean, we finally came to a nice compromise.
Son's name, cat's name is Doggy.
There you go.
His name is Doggy.
I will say this about cats and cat owners. I was encouraged last year that I think these books will really take off at some point in time. And the clue that I had was that I met a woman, and she came up to me and she said, "Doug, I loved your books. And I just got a new cat, and I named him Jack." Bingo! When the crazy cat ladies name their cats after your character, you're on your way. Yes? Yes, sir?
It seems to me it would be difficult to write a book on something that you don't have a background with. You have the investigations and murders and plots. So what do you do? How do you do your research?
Research?
mother-in-law.
You sound like my wife. She doesn't understand how I can start writing a book and be writing a story when I have no idea what the story is going to be or where it's going to go or how it's going to happen. I say, it'll happen. It'll come about. I don't know what life is bringing to me, so you just make it up. Where Jack is not, he's not a detective. He's not a policeman. I don't need to be held real closely to police procedures. So I can take a certain amount of license with that. But I am finding that when, like in the book that I'm currently writing, I had to find out a little bit more about some procedures, how a police department would investigate something, how the Attorney General's office works, and all of that. And you make a phone call. You know, you call up a police department, you say, hey, listen, I'm writing a book. This is what I'm, would you give me 5 minutes of your time and just kind of give me the outline of how you go about these steps? And they're usually very happy to sit and chat for a little bit. The same thing, with the coroner's office or something. You can make a phone call, and most of the time, they're very happy to sit and chat with you for a little bit. I have sat down with the police chief in Rye and asked him to give a quick read to some passages and say, does this make sense? I mean, is this kind of how you would have handled an investigation? And he would say, well, yeah, we do this and we do that, but, we might want to change that. So I'll get some feedback, but I don't have to be held to real super accurate details because I'm not writing that character. That makes sense? But you always learn something.
It's fiction.
It's fiction. I make it up. Exactly. That's my answer. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions.
Yes.
How many times did you watch Murder, She Wrote? And how long does it take you to write a book, seriously?
I do recall watching Murder, She Wrote. I couldn't tell you how many times, but I don't remember that far back so well anymore. Each of these, well, the first book was probably about 3 years from start to finish because of all the rewrites. In between those rewrites, I had started the second book. So I would finish a rewrite of the first. I would either just put it on the shelf for a month or two, or I would let somebody else read it. And while they were doing that, I was starting the next book. So the two kind of worked together. That book probably took maybe 2 years to do. And right now I'm finding, I think it's going to be about a year per book. The fourth book, I started it last fall, and I expect to have it out this fall. And I have ideas in my head for the fifth book. And so I'm already starting, the ideas are kind of percolating in the back of my head. There's no words on paper, but the idea is kind of percolating. And,
do you ever get your characters mixed up that way?
Oh boy. I'm only just now learning. I really have to make a list. Every time I come up with a new character or a name, I've got to write it down. Because I've been very bad about that, especially in the first couple of books. And I remember at one point I was in the second book. No, it was in the third one, Dangerous Shoals. I had a scene and I needed the secretary's name in the police department. Damn, if I could remember I had to reread the whole first book to find one mention of this. I only mentioned the name once, but I knew it was in there. I had to read the whole damn book to find it. So I'm trying to make a point whenever I come up with a new name to at least make a note of who they are and what it is. It's a learning process, and for me, I'm still learning. But keeping track of it all is sometimes it gets confusing.
All you read that first paragraph, the first part of the book, and if you close your eyes, you can find yourself in that room. While you're reading it. You can almost see the cat, you can almost see the room.
That's what I want. Yeah, that's the way, you want to, I think books that are enjoyable suck the reader in. And again, because I'm very visual, I think that comes through in, that you can picture it. Now, you might not picture the room exactly the same way she would picture it.
The bed might have been in a different direction.
But, those are little details that I'm not sure you have to have that level of detail, but you have to have enough that the reader can see it in their mind. And that's the joy of reading, is that, you become part of the story, and you see it a little bit differently than the next guy that reads it, but it's equally relevant for both of you. Yes, sir.
Somebody asked about making a movie out of the book. It reminded me of a great scene from a movie I saw where a very serious book writer said, this is going to be the cruelty of the death penalty. My lead character did not commit the murder, but he dies in the electric chair. But whatever you do, I don't want the ending to have Bruce Willis coming in to save him at the last minute, and he falls into the arms of Julia Roberts. Well, they make the movie, and that's exactly what Bruce Willis comes out, Julia Roberts. And you know what? The writer was thrilled, because they made the movie
It happens.
I don't know, if a book was your child, so to speak, wouldn't you hate it if they changed the ending like that?
I don't know. I haven't had to face that situation. Talk to me when it happens. What is interesting, though, is that when I know I wrote these, but when I sit down and I read the book, or reread, parts of them or something, sometimes I just kind of go, really? I did that? Because you forget that, that, yeah, you did create all of this. It's kind of strange. Yes. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you all very much. If anybody would like to get copies of the books,
we're in Northern Essex on May 3rd, and we just had an author speak here for the Lifelong Learning Series. He writes under the name KD Mason, and you've written 3 books.
Yes.
And you discussed the books during the book discussion. Was Harbor Ice?
Harbor Ice, Changing Tides, and Dangerous Shoals is the 3rd book in the series.
And your discussion was really interesting because you discussed a lot of the process of writing, which a lot of people are interested in. And I was fascinated by it, the question and answer, and what you were saying about, how you had really no formal training in writing. I was really impressed by that.
Yes, well, thank you very much. It was a very good, engaged group. The questions that they asked were terrific questions. Some I've never fielded before, which is always enjoyable when that happens.
And I know you were discussing that one particular book you were discussing you had rewritten 7 times?
Well, the first book, when I was, I guess, learning how to write, actually it ended up with 9 complete rewrites, yes. That was Harbor Ice.
Yeah. So you've basically been writing like 1 book a year, pretty much? Or?
Right now, that's the goal I've set for myself, is a book a year. Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of the setting for these, a lot of them are up in the seacoast area.
Yes.
Specifically the Rye Harbor area.
The central point for the books is Rye Harbor. I've created a mythical town called Rye Harbor. And pretty much from York, Maine to northern Massachusetts, that seacoast area is where the majority of the action takes place. Although Changing Tides, the second book, does travel. There's a portion of the book that takes place in Newport, Rhode Island, and also a portion that takes place in Belize. But they all return, start and finish, in Rye Harbor.
That's a really beautiful area. And from what I understand, you used to own a restaurant up in Rye Harbor?
Yes. I used to own Saunders at Rye Harbor, and the restaurant has since closed, and this is part of my self-reinvention.
Yeah, you were mentioning how you had to really become a lot of the characters in your books, especially the villains in the book, the psychopathic killers, so to speak, and how it's quite an interesting process to actually become, figuratively those people.
Yeah, it is. I think to write a character, the characters have to be believable, and to do that, I think you have to, in many ways, become the character, to understand them and to be able to, express what they're like. And so, yeah, you got to be a little bit of an actor, I guess.
And I think, like you were saying, you said after you write a book, you sometimes you can't believe you actually wrote it. I mean, because I feel like no matter what you do, especially creative pursuits, that there's a part of the process that is out of your control in a way.
Oh yeah, there is. But when you sit back and like Harbor Ice came out in 2009, and I look at it and I know I wrote it, but sometimes I'm still in that pinch me. I really did that kind of stage, and it becomes a big part of your life, but at the same time it feels detached, I guess.
Like you said, you didn't intend to be a writer during your talk?
No.
And
just kind of happened.
But now that you're doing it, you can't imagine not doing it.
Exactly.
Well, thanks a lot for talking with Haverhill Community Television, and thanks for coming to Northern Essex. And
thank you very much for having me.
So many people in the audience said they loved your books, and
that's always good to hear.
They were talking about the possibilities of how does something become a movie, and
you never know.
Just what you just said, you never know. That's somebody who he made it pretty big told me that. You never know what might happen. I mean, I think that's a good adage to live by.
Oh, absolutely. You take it one day at a time, and you just, I guess to put it maybe crudely, but you just keep throwing stuff at the wall, and eventually something sticks, and if it sticks, then you work with that. And so I'm always looking for opportunities for self-promotion. I mean, I have to introduce myself to the world, and that's why I'm here today. That's why I'll be somewhere else tomorrow and the next day, and hopefully the right person reads the right book at the right time and gives it to the right person, and all of a sudden my life changes. But in the meantime, it's just fun.
Yeah, you seem to be having a lot of fun.
I am, absolutely.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for coming down here, and it was a great time.
Thank you.
The lonely sea, the lonely sea, it never stops for you. For me. That's why